Hi there, and welcome to the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health webinars. My name's Dawn Clifford, and I am so excited to be presenting another webinar to you on behalf of the ASDA Education Committee. I'm out here in California State University, Chico on the West Coast, and our speaker today is Joy Cox, and she's on the East Coast. So how about that technology where we can moderate a webinar from one coast to the other coast and offer you this exciting educational session on the topic of intersectionality. We're super excited about this topic in ASDA because we are all about promoting size, diversity, and health in the form of a social justice movement. And we really can't be doing the social justice work that we need to be doing without really investigating the topic of intersectionality. So Joy is here today to shine a light on this topic and give us at least a brief overview of how that relates to the health at every size paradigm and the work that we do as advocates. So I'm going to be introducing Joy, and she'll be speaking today all the way from Rutgers University. So Joy Cox is currently a doctoral student at Rutgers University within the communications department, and she's studying the impacts of stigma, identity, and social movements. Her current area of interest revolves around the fat acceptance movement, women, and weight stigma. So thank you so much, Joy, for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share on this important topic.
Hi, Dawn, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited and honored to be here today to be presenting on the topic of intersectionality. I do think that this is a very important topic and something that can help shed light on the ways in which our lived experiences kind of impact the world around us. And so I like to preface this my presentation by saying that intersectionality is a very, very, very broad topic in a lot of ways, and it has a lot of information. And so today my hope is to do it some justice. Obviously I'm not going to be able to get to everything about intersectionality today, but I hope that for those who have never heard of intersectionality or wasn't sure exactly what it means, that you are able to kind of take away a little bit of information about intersectionality, at least enough that may spark your motivation to dig a little bit deeper about intersectionality and find out in what ways it impacts you. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go and pull up my slides here so everyone can see them. And we will get ready to go here. Okay, so hopefully I'm hoping that everybody can see the slides at this point. It does say that it's the title of the presentation is Intersectionality Simplified, what every HAYS advocate and practitioner needs to know, HAYS standing for health at every size. Okay, and so before I go ahead and just delve into all the information that I have about intersectionality, I would like to start off with a story, as cheesy as it may sound, but hang in there with me. I'm sure, hopefully, it will be pretty exciting here. So first, hopefully everyone can see this. What you're actually looking at right here is what's known as the Pan American Highway. The Pan American Highway is actually the longest highway in the world. It is also, let's see here. It's the longest highway in the world. It's also over 29,000 miles long, and it spans across 14 countries, right? So not cities, not states, right? Not counties, 14 countries, y'all. So, and kind of looking at this, I just kind of want you to kind of, if you can, kind of just let that sink in for a moment, right? And think about what exactly that means. Right, to have a highway, there were people, right, that literally, in a lot of ways, you know, had to kind of put this thing together, right? And so if you look at the map, you can kind of see that the highway actually passes from South America up and through Canada, right? So now we're not just talking about cities, states, and counties. We're literally talking about continents, right? And so when you kind of sit and you let that sink in, how much work, right, and workers do you think it took to actually make this highway a success? Right? What about the many cultures, the customs, the speed limits, the roads, the exits and entrance lanes, right? That folks needed to consider while building this highway, that made it so inclusive, right? And maybe this is why I don't, maybe this is why I never took up construction, right, as a growing up. But this sounds pretty exhausting to me, that there are so many different factors that you have to consider in building a highway to make it work for everybody. Right. And so while you're kind of thinking about this, I also want you to take a look at my next slide. Right. So what about these beauties, right? As we look at these, now these are actual highways. And if you look here, you can see that there are many roads, there's many lanes, there's, stuff on top, stuff on the bottom. And if you really look, from the angle in which our view is, you can actually see that they almost look like works of art. Right. And again, the question that I pose is like, who comes up with this stuff, right? Who's able to kind of think about, all the needs that need to be tended to, right? For the people who actually construct roads in such a way that it enables people to drive different vehicles at different speeds in different lanes, going different places, right, to adequately arrive at their destinations, right? And to me, how can you even start to talk about these types of structures? At least this is what I think, right? So how can you even start to talk about these types of structures without mentioning the importance of intersections, right? And so to me, it's practically a no-brainer for those who are in the industry of building highways and building, bridges and things of this nature, that intersections are a big deal. And not only are they a big deal, but they have to consider in a lot of ways that there are more than one realities for the drivers that are on the roads. Now, I don't know if you can see or not, but in these pictures, particularly the ones that we have up currently, if you look, you can see that there's different lanes, even though those lanes are headed in the same direction, right? And if I could, I would like to personally take this time out to kind of thank whoever was in the boardroom during these meetings who made that far left lane, right? Because that's the passing lane, that's the fast lane, that's the lane that I live in. People who know me know that they say I have a lead foot. I guess I have a need for speed, but I'm grateful for that individual that spoke up, that said, hey, I think we need a lane that is designed for people to be able to pass other people who are driving too slow, right? So grateful for that. But when you think about highways and you think about construction, there are so many different factors that you have to take in to consider when you are trying to make something that's inclusive for everyone, right? And people who do construction, who form these roads, they are well aware that there are many simultaneous factors, right, to take into account to avoid issues pretty much like this. Right. So here you can kind of see just by staring at this picture that there's some type of chaos that's happening. Right. And we may not know everything that's happening just standing by the picture alone. But perhaps one of the reasons that traffic is so congested here is because there are failures to take heed to the intersections that are put in place. Right. And so here we can see, that there's probably failures to yield, right? There's also failures to acknowledge what other drivers are attempting to do. And oftentimes, just like this picture, we often find ourselves in this place of chaos when there's a failure in acknowledging the intersections in our own lives, right? And also in others. So hopefully, what I'm hoping today, right, that this presentation will do for us all, is that you'll have a better understanding of what intersectionality is, right? How Hayes plays a part in that, what it means to acknowledge difference and celebrate diversity, and how to combat weight stigma in these contexts, right? So if you've been able to kind of bear with me through that story, I would love to go ahead and get started, okay? And so first we'll talk about what intersectionality is, right? When people say intersectionality, what exactly do they mean, right? And so this woman right here is Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, and she is the individual who coined what we know today as intersectionality theory, right? And this was created in 1989. And so what Dr. Crenshaw actually was able to find out through her analysis was that when difference is overlooked, conflict ensues within groups because group members with less visibility are silenced or pushed in categories that limit their access to total liberty. And so one of the things that Dr. Crenshaw was actually looking at is that she was looking at social movements at the time. And a lot of the work that was being done on social movements was actually being done between groups. So in other words, for women's rights, they were looking at the difference between women's rights and men's rights, right? But no one was really actually analyzing what the women's rights movement looked like within its own organization or its own structure. So Dr. Crenshaw decided to take a look into this. All right. And what she began to analyze and find out is that the lived experiences of Black women and the ways in which they were required to navigate their liberties was different than what white women needed to do. Right. And from this, what she was able to say is that there was no way to understand the lived experience of women without understanding their race, right, and where it played a part, and then also their class. And so here we have these different social categories that begin to intersect with one another, interlock with one another. And this is the only way that we have a better idea of the ways in which people navigate their lives, right? And so this is kind of the way that intersectionality started out. And then from there, we have Dr. Patricia Hill Collins, who extended the theory of intersectionality theory, Dr. Crenshaw's theory, and she began to talk about the ways in which intersectionality did not just have to apply to African American women. Even though Dr. Collins is widely known for Black feminist thought, she, in her own analysis, said, well, it didn't just have to be, intersectionality didn't have to be just limited to Black women, but it could be to all women, right? We could apply this to all women in the different identities that we hold in our everyday life. And so that kind of expanded the theory as we know it, right? And if we kind of fast forward to today's time, what we now see is that there are different ways in which intersectionality now plays a part, right? And so now many groups use intersectionality as a way to explain the conundrums they face while navigating life in different social spaces. And here we have the issues, contexts like body size, mental and emotional health, as well as ableism in conjunction with other oppressed identities taking center stage, right? So now we see that it's more than race, it's more than gender, it's more than socioeconomic status, but there are these other things and these other issues and these other parts of our identity that are now rising, that people are now starting to speak up and saying, hey, me being a part of these particular social categories also have an impact on my lived experience. Okay. And so I say all of that to kind of come to the actual technical definition of what we know intersectionality to be. And so intersectionality can be defined as the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. And in a lot of ways, that's a mouthful, right? And so a way that we can kind of look at this, maybe possibly to simplify it, is that intersectionality says that our identities are not just interrelated, right? But that they are interlocked with one another. And this interlocking has a bearing on the ways in which we are treated in society, whether that be to our advantage or to our detriment. So intersectionality is pretty much focused on structures and the discrimination that happens within these spaces. And pretty much intersectionality kind of deals with what identities matter, how they matter, and when they matter, right? And this, for many reasons, is the reason why a lot of individuals and groups who suffer from being stigmatized in society actually find a home in intersectionality, right? Because intersectionality deals more with social structures that have been set up. And within those social structures, there's discrimination that is happening within those social structures based on the identities that people qualify themselves as, or the identities that society has given them. Okay. And so you probably are wondering at this point, right? Okay, we understand in some shape, way, or form what intersectionality is, but maybe you want to understand a little bit more in what ways this actually applies to HAES, right? And so kind of playing off of one of my favorite entertainers, Miss Tina Turner, right? I asked the question, so what's HAES got to do with it, right? And something that's pretty cool about HAES, what I've learned through the process of me doing my research, is that HAES is in fact intersectional and interdisciplinary in this form, right? And so the next couple of slides that I have are actually information that's pulled straight off of the HAES website, right, which is found at sizediversityandhealth.org. And I just want to kind of go through the steps to kind of highlight the ways in which HAES is in fact intersectional and then also interdisciplinary, right? And so first, the HAES approach comes out of discussions among healthcare workers, consumers, and activists. So here you can kind of see that there are several different identities, right? Identities of different professions, of different individuals that are overlapping to come together to work on a platform that kind of gives liberty to individuals in the actual HAES program. In addition to that, HAES also understands that there is an approach that can be used that impacts both policy and individual decision making. And so again, we also see here how HAES also can be intersectional in the idea of understanding that individuals impact the way that policy works, right? And vice versa. And so it's not just about one type of person, it's not just about one idea, but it's the ways in which these ideas, these individuals, these messages that are sent out kind of overlap and create a reality, create sort of social structures, right? Reinforce what's going on in social structures and how they can impact that and make a difference. In addition to that, HAES also addresses broad forces that support health, such as safe and affordable access. So here, we aren't just talking about body size, right? And so what's really cool about the HAES program and even how it functions within intersectionality, HAES also understands that, that there's a lot more, right, that is contributed to weight stigma and weight discrimination just beyond body size, right? We also, like, we know that, you know, economic status has an impact on weight, has an impact on body size, people that have access to different resources, right? And then on top of that, we also understand that body size is not the only thing, right, that can be considered health. Oftentimes when we, you know, if you look at weight loss programs or different things like that, everybody's kind of focused on just that one factor, and that's how much you weigh, right? But HAES takes a different approach, and they're saying we're going to be supportive of all types of health, right? So that's not just physical health, but that's also emotional health and mental health, right? And not only that, but we also want to make sure that it's safe and that it's affordable, right? So again, you see that HAES is acknowledging that there are a lot of different issues, overlapping issues that help determine the overall health of the individuals who participate in their program. And then last but not least, HAES also helps people to find sustainable practices that support individual and community well-being. The HAES approach also honors the healing power of social connections, evolves in response to the experiences and needs of a diverse community, and grounds itself in a social justice framework. And just like Dawn kind of talked about earlier in the introduction of the speech, or in the introduction of my presentation, there is really no way that HAES can be on a social justice type platform and follow a social justice framework without addressing the issues of intersectionality. And I think what we see here is that it's woven, right? So understanding intersectionality, at least, is woven into the actual Hayes framework, which I think is awesome. What I also think is awesome is, along with organizations, I think it's always good to kind of have something that you can read, something that's on paper, as far as where organizations stand. And so I think that this is great to have. But I also think that this is also oftentimes something that is drafted in theory. And the hard work comes when we need to apply what it is that we believe. And so now what I'd like to do is kind of take a step forward and kind of talk about the ways in which application can be given to the matters of intersectionality within the Hayes program. And so again, taken from the actual website, sizediversityandhealth.org, you'll see that Hayes has been founded on 5 principles. And you can read them for your own pleasure, but there's only one principle that I really want to touch on today in today's particular presentation. And that principle is the principle of respectful care. Okay, so you can kind of see it's my little PowerPoint here is doing special effects of some sort. Okay, and so what I actually want to talk about in regards to respectful care, and I'm going to modify this a little bit, but kind of going back to what Dr. Crenshaw spoke about regarding intersectionality and the tension that can be created within groups when identities are overlooked. This focus, or the focus of this talk, right, is designed for Hayes advocates and practitioners and how we actually interact with one another. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and read this here, but it says respectful care is to acknowledge our biases and work to end weight discrimination, weight stigma, and weight bias. To provide information and services from an understanding that socioeconomic status, race, gender, sexual orientation, age, and other identities impact weight stigma and support environments that address these inequities. And so what I would like to do is to really kind of focus on this third point here and kind of turn that respectful care inwardly, right? So I would like us to kind of think about the ways in which we can acknowledge our own biases, right? And in many cases, our own privileges, and kind of think about the ways that we can work to end discrimination within our own spaces as a Hayes advocate and also as a practitioner. Additionally, we also want to be able to understand the ways in which different identities impact status and social structures, and also be aware and empathetic towards those. So we want to be able to create a supportive environment for those that we interact with, understanding that they do bring all of their identities with them, right? So kind of like we talked about earlier when we deal with the definition of intersectionality, you don't get to leave an identity at home, right? So your identities are interlocked with one another. They're not just merging, they're not just meshing, right? But if I am a Black woman, a fat Black woman, who is a heterosexual, I take that identity everywhere I go, right? No matter what. Even if there's one identity that seems more salient than the other, that's still part of my lived experience, right? And so we need to understand that as advocates and practitioners, that the people that we encounter, they are also bringing all of their identities with them, whether they be visible or not. And we want to be able to acknowledge their presence and respect their existence, because when we do that, great things can happen. Right. And we create this open atmosphere. We create this safe place for individuals to open up, to be themselves, and to have liberty, oftentimes the liberty that they've been so desperately seeking for so long. And so we have an opportunity to impact people's lives in such an awesome way. Right. And so what we do know, we know that as of right now, fat shaming doesn't work, right? And we are aware that because fat shaming doesn't work, it's not really a point for us to do it. We know that according to academic articles, this is true. And we also know that this most recent advertisement from Gold's Gym here can also say that fat shaming doesn't work. As a matter of fact, the franchise who promoted this actual advertisement was dropped from Gold's Gym. They actually have parted ways with them since all the kickback that came from this latest advertisement from them. In addition to this, I'm also pretty sure that most of us have also heard of the concept of what it means to have like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So if we are constantly telling people something, or if someone has constantly told you something in your life, whether it be negative or positive, the self-fulfilling prophecy says that there comes a point in time when you actually start to believe what people say, and then you start to act accordingly, right? And so the goal here in understanding intersectionality and understanding where that fits within the Hayes paradigm is that we don't really want to push our own issues. We don't want to push our own biases. We don't want to insist that our way is the best way, but we do want to be able to have open arms and have an open mind and an open heart towards the individuals that we may come in contact with every day, right? That we may interact with every day, and understand that they don't think like us. Their bodies may not be like ours. And they have their own experiences, right? And they also have their own realities, right? So in short, spewing our own biases or minimizing the existence of others with our behavior will not produce a positive outcome, right? So as a Hayes advocate and as a practitioner, you want to make sure that you are checking yourself, right? That respectful care, kind of going back to that, making sure that you're acknowledging your own biases, making sure that you are checking yourself against weight bias and weight discrimination and weight stigma, because these are things that we've been surrounded by all of our lives. And oftentimes we may participate in some actions and some behaviors. We may have some thoughts that don't exactly line up with what it really means to liberate others, right? And we may find that, but that comes from self-reflection. Okay. And so moving forward, I kind of want to talk about the ways in which we can embrace and celebrate difference and diversity. And so I don't know if you all, I don't know how old everybody is here, but for 80s babies, okay, so I'm an 80s baby. These things may look somewhat familiar to you. These are things that I remember having to play with when I was in elementary school, when I was in kindergarten, filling out charts, filling out papers. And here, pretty much the concept is that you have to find the thing that doesn't belong. And so my own personal experience with this is that, at least in the United States, historically, difference has always been seen as something that is negative, right? And so now looking at, having somebody turn and say, no, we should embrace difference, we should celebrate difference. For some people, that's a hard pill to swallow, right? And if you can kind of see here on the slide, one of the activities, it's labeled, I mean, the actual label of the activity is which doesn't belong. Okay. And so it's okay to be able to tell the difference between, to talk about similarities and differences. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression by saying, by acknowledging that something is different, that it's wrong. But what I am saying is that when that difference is labeled as wrong, then things become problematic. Okay. And so when we kind of look at what difference means in this particular country and in the society that we live in, sometimes it's hard to not see difference as a problem, right? And so we kind of want to get away from that, particularly within the Hayes program, because we are promoting size diversity, right? And we are saying that there are a lot of different ways for you to embrace good mental health, good emotional health, right? There's a good way for you to have there are good ways for you to have good relationships with your bodies and with others, right? And so we kind of want to kind of get away from that idea that difference is wrong, okay? And then for those who may have grown up on Sesame Street, right? I remember this is one of the things that played back in my mind often. But this little clip here.
One of these things is not like the others. One of these things doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other by the time I finish this song?
Right. So again, here we have this issue, right, of where being able to look at difference. It's always something that doesn't belong, always something that sticks out, right? It's like, it sticks out like a sore thumb. And so over time, in a lot of ways, we've been socialized to look at difference as a problem and not necessarily as something to be celebrated, right? And so one thing that I want to drive home is that difference is okay, right? We're all different, and there's absolutely, positively, without a shadow of doubt, nothing wrong with being different. Nothing at all, right? I'm not the same height as somebody. I'm not the same size as somebody. I don't practice the same things that everybody else practices, and that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In addition to that, it's also important that we know our own identities, our own intersections, and our own privilege, right? And so in many ways, I could say by my own personal identities, right? Like I said before, if I'm a fat Black woman, and I'm heterosexual, but I'm also a PhD student, I need to also understand that there are some things that I'm privileged in that other people are not, right? So I understand that individuals who are in same-sex relationships may not have the same privileges as someone who is heterosexual. I also understand that me being a PhD student at Rutgers University provides me with a certain level of privilege that other people do not have. However, I also understand that perhaps a white, smaller sized woman who is also heterosexual and a PhD student has certain privileges that I do not have, right? And so it helps to know your own identities. It helps to know your own intersections, and it helps to know your own privilege. And a lot of intersectionality, in order for you to properly relate to other people, is going to deal a lot with you doing self-reflection, a lot with you looking inwardly, looking at your own issues or your own identities, your own struggles that you face, and understanding that there are people out there who don't face those same struggles as you, who may be different than you, and that's okay, right? Because the goal is to come together and to work in unity, and to create safe places for one another, right? And then this third point is something that I kind of want to drive home. I believe that it's not good enough just to show diversity, right? And that our ultimate goal should be to spur meaningful connections, right? And you can't do this obviously without acknowledging difference and celebrating it. But with that being said, I think that oftentimes it's easy, especially in a lot of modern day movements, for us to get involved to where, we don't really move to a place of action. So dialogue is good. And I think dialogue is great when that's all that you can do. But there comes a point where we have to move past dialogue and we have to actually move into action. And so being a part of the HAYES program, being a part of Health at Every Size, pretty much gives us this opportunity to do daily. We have a daily opportunity to interact with people, to understand them better, to talk to people who may not be from the same walk of life as us. And I think that we should personally take advantage of that and make connections. And so just something to keep in mind as we are moving forward. Some of us have been in Hays for a very long time, while some of us are fairly new to all that it has to offer. And so one of the many ways that we can kind of keep in mind the issues of intersectionality and to be mindful of these things, creating safe spaces for others, is that there is no such thing as a bad body, right? We are all different. If you're short, if you're tall, if you're wider, if you're thinner, if you have all your limbs, if you don't have all your limbs, if you have the function of your body, if you don't, it doesn't make your body any better or any worse than anyone else's, right? There's also no bad way to be active, right? So oftentimes in more modern day weight loss programs and things of that nature, right, it seems like the more you push your body, the better the workout is, right? So unless you are sprawled out on the floor with, and they got to take you off with a stretcher, you haven't really done the workout that you needed to do, right? You want to push your body to a place to where it's like dilapidated or something, right? And so if you choose to do those types of workouts, boot camp types of workouts, as a matter of fact, I just got done doing like the Insanity program because I like to push myself. That's great. But if you're also the type of person who loves to walk, that's great too. If you're the type of person who loves to play with your kids, that's a great way to be active as well. Me and my friends, we often joke about being active, and I tell them, I say, exercise, what we call exercise is like a fancy way of what, as children, our parents used to say, we'll just go outside and play, right? And so now, we come up with more sophisticated ways of playing, so to speak, outside and in different areas, different environments. But there's really no bad way to be active, right? There's also no set way of finding motivation, spirituality, etc. And these are also things that we should be mindful of, as we all have different beliefs and we all have those things that push us, that make us want to get up and do what we do. And that's not just motivations, whether it be to have healthy lives, but that's just motivation, for your goals and different things like that, to understand that we differ on those levels, and that's okay. And then last but not least, there's also no set way of managing hunger and appetite. What I eat is what I eat. What somebody else eats is what they eat. What I like, what I don't like, et cetera, et cetera. We all have our own ways of making things work, and we have to be willing and able to trust our bodies enough that it's going to do the job that we need it to do. And so as a Hays advocate and as someone who may be a practitioner that follows the guidelines and the steps of Hays, you want to make sure that you are not enforcing your own thoughts, your own beliefs on someone else about what they should be doing for themselves and for their bodies, as they have their own experiences that they are bringing to the table. And that is going to change the way that they see the world around them and how they perceive others. And then last but not least, I want to talk about the issue of real connection, right? And so real connection happens when we learn how to communicate with one another and find common grounds and interactions. And so one of the things that I do over the summer, which I actually just got done doing, when I'm not reading chapters upon chapters upon chapters for my own degree, I have the privilege, the opportunity to teach over the summer. And for the past 3 years, I've been teaching, since 2012. So the past 4 years, I've been teaching public speaking classes. And I know that I've said it enough times in this presentation that I would probably have some pretty sharp critiques for myself. But with that being said, one of the things that I teach my students during public speaking is the importance of audience analysis. And there's actually a whole chapter in the book that we cover that's dedicated to audience analysis. And audience analysis is pretty much what it sounds like. It's you being able to know what your audience likes, what they don't like, how they feel about certain things, what they believe, etc. And the importance of audience analysis is because if you know your audience, and you're able to craft a message for them, it makes them trust you more. It makes them more open to the things that you have to say, and they feel connected to you, right? And so the issue about finding common ground is that there's a good possibility that we probably have more things in common than we have that's different. And that's not to say that we should not acknowledge difference, but that is to say that when we can make real connections with one another by spending time with one another, by knowing what each other likes, what we don't like, what we stand for, what we believe, what we don't believe, real connection starts to happen then in that place. And so one of the things that I want to encourage us as Hays advocates is and practitioners is that when you have a platform to share the message of Hays, to share the message of what it means to be healthy at every size, to remember that you are speaking to an audience that you probably want to know something about, right? That you want to really take the opportunity and the time to get to know the people that you speak to, to connect with them in ways that they will find you trustworthy, to connect with them in ways that they will find themselves connected to you, right? Because when we are connected, when we are united, then we can fight against weight stigma, right? And so what we do know about weight stigma, we know that weight stigma, particularly in this country and throughout the West, that weight stigma is prevalent in society and it's pretty much considered the norm, right? So we know that what we're fighting against, in a lot of ways, people don't even see as a problem. And so in order to kind of combat these things, we need to be united, right? We need to be empowered. And we need to pretty much, frankly speaking, have each other's back, right? And so Hays should be a safe place for those who seek shelter under its principles, right? So that we are a community, right? By being a community, we can also fight against weight discrimination. Being able to combat the issues that someone else may face because of weight discrimination. And what you start to realize and start to find is that weight stigma, weight discrimination, mental health, emotional health, these all, the discrimination against mental health and emotional health, these all take different turns depending on the identities in which we embody, right? And so together, when we're united, we can fight against the things that impact our emotional and mental well-being, right? With all those who struggle alongside us, right? So we're not falling into that place that Dr. Crenshaw talked about, where there's tension within a group because somebody's story is not being told, right? Nobody is feeling invisible in this space. Everybody's visible. Everybody matters. Everybody's struggle matters. And so it's important that we learn how to unite with one another. It's important that we acknowledge each other's differences, that we celebrate each other's differences, right? That we don't do this broad stroking thing that, right now is going on in society more recently, probably more salient with the All Lives Matter movement, right? And so when you have people that saying all lives matter and they kind of are blotting out the difference, right? The different realities that other people are experiencing, particularly Black people are experiencing in their spaces, it becomes problematic, right? And the group, if I would say the group of lives, right? That's like that's the population, that's everybody. But imagine how that makes people feel, how they feel invalidated, when they bring another reality to the table and people tell them that's not what's important. What's important is everybody else. And so we want to make sure that we're not doing that within the Hays paradigm as advocates, as practitioners. We want to make sure that we are creating this safe space for the people that we encounter. We want to make sure that we are standing for one another, that we are defending one another, that we are protecting one another, right? And when we see issues of weight stigma, when we see these issues of weight discrimination, right, and these struggles that those who are walking with us in this context face, that we'll have enough courage to stand up and say something, right? That we'll be able to speak about the issues that we see, And this is why it's so important that along with intersectionality and not just seeing the difference in someone else, that you also notice where you stand, because then you'll be able to see how somebody treats you is different from the way that they treat another person. And oftentimes we don't see that because we don't spend enough time evaluating our own identities, evaluating our own privileges. And that's not to say that that's something that should make us feel bad about having, but we can then start to think strategically in ways in which we can use our identities, we can use our privileges to stand up and fight on behalf of someone else. Because when we stand united, we can win, right? When we stand united, we all have something to gain. And we can stand united with our differences. We don't have to stand united apart from one another. And so that's what's so awesome about Hays, because Hays gives such a broad, such broad opportunities for everyone to kind of fall under this umbrella, right, of acceptance, whether it be size diversity, mental health, emotional health. We're all in different walks of life. We're all in different places, and Hays has a place for all of that, right? But it's up to us as advocates, and it's up to us as practitioners to make sure that we are applying these principles in the right way, and that we're not doing more harm than good, even if our intentions are good. Because oftentimes I believe that more likely than not, our intentions are good. But in the process of us having good intentions, our strategies tend to be a little off. The ability for us to apply what we've learned tends to be a little off, and people wind up leaving a little bit disappointed. Okay. And so, with all of that being said, I just like to draw your attention back to one of the slides that we've seen in the beginning of my presentation. And again, here you can see just the work of art that it takes to create highways, just the work of art that it takes, the type of planning that it takes to create something that's so vast and it serves so many people. And I look at these pictures, and honestly, they don't become simpler because I talk about intersectionality. They don't become simpler because I talk about intersections. This still is like, I'm never going to do this type of construction ever in my life, right? I still have that feeling. So that doesn't change. But what I do have hope towards is that it works, right? And so these people who created these highways, that created these exit and entrance lanes, and I don't even want to get into, people who decide the speed limit, because I actually looked that up, and that's a whole nother animal. But they've managed to make it work. And so what I would leave you all with today is that it's doable. Intersectionality, understanding how intersectionality works and understanding the ways in which we can strategically come together to combat issues of weight discrimination and stigma in our society is possible. Us coming together and unifying, as like on these roads, you can see there's cars, some of them going in the same direction, some going slower than others, some going faster than others. It's doable. It's workable. We have trucks, we got cars, we got vans, different people, different walks of life, different realities. Some people are late for work, some people are early, all driving on the same road at the same time. And so I would encourage you today in knowing that difference is not a problem, right? Difference has never been a problem. And that difference is worthy to be celebrated. Diversity is worthy to be celebrated. Understanding who we are, understanding our identities as people and where we fit, with all of our lived experiences, is to be celebrated. But so is unity, and being able to come together and work together so that we can fight against structures like Dr. Crenshaw talked about, right? The structures in society that advocate for discrimination against groups of people. We can stand up and actually fight against that is what makes us powerful. There truly is power in numbers. And so with that being said, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. I'd like to thank, once again, I'd like to thank Dawn for having me. I'm going to go ahead and show my face again. Hello. I'd like to thank Dawn for having me. and just the opportunity to share this information with you all about intersectionality and how it's important and the ways that we can think about intersectionality and our interactions on a daily basis, and incorporate it in our daily lives, and especially within the Hayes paradigm, since the paradigm itself is ripe for application. So thank you so much. I hope you all enjoy your day. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and I look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thank you so much, Joy. That was wonderful and so inspiring too. I'm just fired up and feel just honored to be part of this movement that really is about celebrating diversity. And now we've had a chance to look at all the forms of diversity and how they intersect. And I love your highway analogy. It's just beautiful. So thank you so much, Joy, for this wonderful and enlightening presentation. And again, this is a webinar on intersectionality brought to you by the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health, ASDA, and we hope you'll join us in this fight to bring unity and to bring freedom to individuals who suffer from all sorts of stigma in this world for all sorts of different reasons. Thank you so much, and take care, y'all.